The mayor's black sedan pulled into Marcus Chen's driveway at exactly 3:47 p.m., just as Karen Whitmore emerged from her house with a stack of freshly printed violation notices. Her face went ashen as she watched the city's most powerful official step out, straighten his tie, and walk straight toward the very pool deck she'd been trying to shut down for months. What Karen didn't know was that her relentless campaign against Marcus's weekend gatherings had just triggered the most spectacular backfire in neighborhood history, and, in 20 minutes, she'd discover that sometimes the very laws you weaponize can turn around and destroy you. The bass line from the speakers by Marcus Chen's pool wasn't even that loud, but it might as well have been a sledgehammer against Karen Whitmore's skull. She stood at her kitchen window, gripping her coffee mug with white knuckles, watching the dozen or so people laughing and splashing in the crystal-clear water next door. "Unacceptable," she muttered, her lips pressed into a thin line. The digital clock on her microwave read to 15 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon. Absolutely unacceptable. Marcus had moved into the house 18 months ago, and Karen had initially been hopeful. The previous owners, the Hendersons, had been quiet retirees who kept to themselves. But Marcus, with his expensive suits during the week and his casual weekend gatherings, was everything Karen despised about the changing neighborhood. She watched him now, standing by his outdoor grill, flipping burgers while wearing a Harvard Medical School t-shirt. Show off, she thought. Just because he was some hotshot doctor didn't mean he could turn their respectable cul-de-sac into a party zone. The final straw came when she saw him hand a beer to someone who looked barely old enough to drink. Karen's eyes narrowed. She'd been documenting these gatherings for weeks, taking photos from behind her curtains, noting dates and times, counting heads. Today, she had enough evidence. She marched to her home office and pulled out a thick folder labeled Chen Violations in her precise handwriting. Inside were printed photos, noise level measurements she'd taken with a phone app, and a carefully researched document outlining every city ordinance Marcus was potentially breaking. 20 minutes later, Karen stood on Marcus's front porch, her folder clutched against her chest like armor. The doorbell's chime was barely audible over the music and laughter from the backyard. Marcus answered the door in swim trunks and a dry t-shirt, his dark hair slightly damp. "Hey, Karen, what's up, Dr. Chen?" she said, refusing to use his first name. "We need to talk." "Sure, come on in. Want something to drink?" This isn't a social call." Karen stepped back, maintaining her distance. "I'm here about your illegal activities." Marcus's eyebrows rose. "Illegal activities?" "Karen, I'm just having a few friends over for a barbecue." "A few friends?" Karen's voice pitched higher. "I count 14 people in your backyard right now. According to City Ordinance 47B, residential gatherings of more than 12 people require a special events permit. Are you serious?" Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You actually counted my guests. I've been documenting everything, Dr. Chen. The noise violations, the parking infractions, the overcrowding. You're running an illegal entertainment venue, and I won't stand for it." From the backyard, someone called out, "Marcus, the burgers are burning." Marcus glanced over his shoulder, then back at Karen. "Look, I'm sorry if we're bothering you. We're not breaking any laws." "That's where you're wrong," Karen opened her folder with a flourish. "I've done my research. Noise ordinances, occupancy limits, parking restrictions. You're in violation of at least 6 different city codes." She thrust a printed page at him. "Here's your formal complaint. I'll be filing this with the city on Monday morning, along with all my documentation. I suggest you hire a lawyer." Marcus took the paper, his jaw tightening as he scanned the contents. "Karen, this is ridiculous. These are my friends. We're not hurting anyone. You're hurting the entire neighborhood. Property values, quality of life, public safety. What happens when someone gets hurt at one of your little parties? Who's liable then? Has anyone complained besides you?" Karen's pause was telling, "That's not the point. The law is the law." "Right?" Marcus folded the paper carefully. "The law is the law. I'll keep that in mind." Something in his tone made Karen take another step back. "Good. I expect these gatherings to stop immediately, or I'll be forced to take further action." "Further action?" "I have connections in the city government, Dr. Chen. I've been a resident of this neighborhood for 12 years. I know people who can make life very difficult for someone who refuses to follow the rules." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Studying her face, "You know what, Karen? You're absolutely right. The law is the law. And if you want to play by the rules, then we should probably make sure we're both following them correctly." "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Just agreeing with you. Thanks for bringing this to my attention." Karen felt slightly off balance by his sudden cooperation. She'd expected more of a fight. "Well, good. I'm glad we understand each other." "Oh, we definitely understand each other now." Marcus smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Have a great weekend, Karen." He closed the door gently, leaving Karen standing on his porch with an uneasy feeling in her stomach. She'd won, hadn't she? So why did she feel like she'd just made a terrible mistake? Back in her house, Karen positioned herself at the kitchen window again. The party was still going strong, but she noticed Marcus talking intensely with someone on his phone, walking back and forth across his patio with urgent gestures. At 4:30 p.m., the guests began leaving, not gradually, but all at once, as if they'd received simultaneous messages. Karen watched with satisfaction as cars pulled away and the music stopped. But her satisfaction was short-lived. At 5:15 p.m., Marcus appeared at his front door again, this time fully dressed in slacks and a button-down shirt. He walked directly to her house and rang her doorbell. Dr. Chen. Karen opened the door cautiously. "I wanted to thank you, Karen. Your visit this afternoon was very enlightening." "Thank me. You inspired me to do some research of my own." "About following the law, like you said." Marcus held up his phone. "I spent the last hour on the city's website, and you're right, there are a lot of regulations we should all be following." Karen's stomach began to churn. "What kind of regulations?" "Well, for starters, did you know that your fence is 3 inches too high according to city code? And that vegetable garden you planted in your front yard, that's actually against the homeowners association rules. Something about maintaining curb appeal. Those are minor. Oh, and the really interesting one, did you know that running a business out of your home requires a special permit? I couldn't help but notice all those cars coming and going from your house during the week. The signs in your windows advertising tutoring services. The groups of kids showing up after school." Karen's face went pale. Her tutoring business provided half her income. That's completely different. "I'm helping children. I'm sure you are. But the law is the law, right? That's what you told me." Marcus's smile was pleasant, but his eyes were cold. "I thought I'd do my civic duty and make sure everyone in the neighborhood is following the rules, just like you're doing for me. You can't what? Report violations to the city." "But that's exactly what you're doing to me." Marcus tilted his head. "Unless, of course, you think we should both just be good neighbors and mind our own business." Karen stared at him, realizing with growing horror that she'd just handed him a loaded weapon: her tutoring business, her garden, her fence. She'd been so focused on finding violations in his life that she'd never considered her own. "I'll see you around, Karen," Marcus said, turning to leave. "And don't worry about my pool parties. I've decided to take your advice and make sure everything I do is completely legal. In fact, I'm planning something special for next weekend. You'll love it." As he walked away, Karen's hands began to shake. She'd started a war, and she was beginning to realize that she'd brought a knife to a gunfight. But what terrified her most was the look in Marcus's eyes, the calm, calculated expression of someone who'd just been handed the perfect opportunity for revenge. And next weekend was only 6 days away. Monday morning arrived with a vengeance. Karen sat at her kitchen table, her laptop open, frantically researching every city ordinance she could find. The tutoring business she'd built over 5 years couldn't just disappear. She had 12 regular students. Their parents depended on her, and she depended on the income. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Hope you have a great week, neighbor. Looking forward to our community gathering this Saturday." Community gathering? Karen's blood pressure spiked. She screenshot the message and added it to her growing file of evidence, then immediately called the city planning office, planning department. "This is Janet." "Yes, I need to report illegal gatherings in my neighborhood," Karen said, pacing. Her kitchen, large parties, noise violations, overcrowding. "I'll need an address and details of the violations." Karen rattled off Marcus's address and her meticulously documented complaints. Janet assured her that an inspector would be assigned to the case and that any violations would be thoroughly investigated. But, as Karen hung up, she realized she'd made another mistake. By officially filing the complaint, she'd created a paper trail that could easily be traced back to her. And if Marcus decided to file counter-complaints, she spent the rest of the morning in a panic, researching home business permits, fence height regulations, and HOA bylaws. The vegetable garden would have to go. The fence could be trimmed, but the tutoring business, that was more complicated. At 2 p.m., her doorbell rang. Karen peered through the peephole and saw a young woman in a city inspector's uniform, clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm Inspector Rodriguez with the City Planning Department. I'm here about a complaint that was filed regarding your property." Karen's heart sank. What kind of complaint? Multiple violations? Unlicensed business operations? Zoning infractions? Fence height discrepancies? "May I come in?" Karen had no choice but to let her in. Inspector Rodriguez was thorough, professional, and relentless. She measured the fence with a laser tool, photographed the front yard garden, and asked detailed questions about Karen's tutoring activities. "How many students do you see per week?" "It's just ... It's just helping neighborhood kids with their homework." "How many, ma'am?" "Maybe ... 12, 15. "And do you charge for these services?" Karen's silence was answer enough. "I'll need to see your business license and permits." "I don't have any permits. I didn't know I needed them." Inspector Rodriguez made notes on her clipboard. "Ma'am, operating a commercial tutoring service from a residential property requires a conditional use permit, a business license, and compliance with parking and occupancy regulations. You're currently in violation of at least 4 city ordinances." "But I've been doing this for years. No one ever complained before." "Well, someone's complaining now." Rodriguez handed Karen a thick packet of papers. "You have 30 days to either obtain the proper permits or cease operations. The fines for continued violations start at $500 per day." After the inspector left, Karen sat in her living room, staring at the violation notices. Her hands shook as she calculated the potential fines. Even if she could get the permits, the process would take months, and there was no guarantee they'd be approved for a residential area. She grabbed her phone and called Marcus. He answered on the first ring. "Karen, how was your day?" "Exactly how my day was, you bastard. I'm sorry, I don't follow the city inspector. The violations, you did this." "I did what?" "I simply followed your advice about reporting violations to the city. The law is the law. Remember, this is different, and you know it. I'm trying to help children, and I'm trying to enjoy my own backyard. But you decided to make that impossible." Marcus's voice lost all pretense of friendliness. "You want to play hardball, Karen? Let's play hardball. What do you want?" "I want you to call the city and withdraw your complaint against me, and if I don't, then I keep digging. And trust me, I'm very good at research. Do you know what else I found? Your property taxes have been claiming a homestead exemption for 12 years, but you've also been claiming business deductions for your tutoring income. That's tax fraud, Karen. Federal tax fraud." Karen's vision blurred. She sank into her chair, the phone pressed against her ear. "How did you—" "I told you, I'm good at research. I have friends in interesting places. Accountants, lawyers, people who understand how to connect dots." Marcus paused. "Withdraw the complaint, Karen, today." "I can't. I already filed it officially." "Then you'd better figure out how to unfile it, because if you don't, I promise you that next Saturday's gathering will be the least of your problems." The line went dead. Karen stared at her phone, then at the violation notices spread across her coffee table. She'd started this war to preserve her quiet neighborhood, but she was beginning to realize that she'd picked a fight with someone who fought dirty and fought to win. At 4 p.m., her doorbell rang again. This time it was Mrs. Patterson from across the street, holding a manila envelope. "Karen, dear, I'm so sorry to bother you, but I received this today, and I thought you should." "No." Karen opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a formal letter from the Homeowners Association, citing violations of the architectural guidelines and requesting her immediate compliance. Attached were photographs of her property, her front yard garden, and her fence, all marked with red arrows pointing to various infractions. "I don't understand," Karen whispered. "Who would?" "The letter says the complaint came from a concerned neighbor who wants to maintain property values." "I'm sorry, Karen. I know how much work you've put into your garden." After Mrs. Patterson left, Karen called the HOA office. The representative was polite but firm. The violations were legitimate, and she had 2 weeks to correct them or face escalating fines. That evening, Karen sat in her darkened living room surrounded by violation notices, permit applications, and legal documents. Her phone buzzed with another text from Marcus. "Sweet dreams, neighbor. Big day tomorrow." She tried calling her lawyer, but his office was closed. She considered calling the police, but what would she tell them? That her neighbor was following her own advice too well. Karen poured herself a glass of wine and stood at her kitchen window, staring at Marcus's house. The lights were on in his home office, and she could see him at his desk, working on his computer. Planning, no doubt, preparing for whatever he had in store for Saturday. She'd lived in this neighborhood for 12 years, built a life here, established herself as the person who maintained standards. But in one afternoon, she'd gone from being the neighborhood watchdog to being the neighborhood problem. And the worst part was, she'd done it to herself. At 11 p.m., her phone rang. Unknown number, Mrs. Whitmore. This is Detective Sarah Chen. With the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, Karen's wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the kitchen floor. "I'm calling about some irregularities in your tax filings that have been brought to our attention. We'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss your business income reporting over the past 5 years. I don't understand who called you." "Ma'am, I can't discuss the source of the referral, but I can tell you that we take tax fraud very seriously. Are you available to meet this Thursday?" Karen sank to the floor, wine soaking into her clothes, glass scattered around her feet. "Thursday, but I haven't done anything wrong. I mean, not intentionally." "Ma'am, we'll sort that out when we meet. Please bring all your business records, tax returns, and financial documentation for the past 5 years. We'll see you Thursday at 10 a.m. The line went dead. Karen sat on her kitchen floor, bleeding from a small cut on her hand, surrounded by broken glass and the ruins of her carefully ordered life. Through her window, she could see Marcus's house. The lights in his office were still on, and she could swear she saw him raise a glass in her direction before disappearing from view. She'd wanted to teach him a lesson about following the rules. Instead, she'd given him a masterclass in how to destroy someone using the very system she'd tried to weaponize against him, and Saturday was still 4 days away. Thursday morning, Karen sat across from Detective Sarah Chen in a sterile conference room at the IRS building, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The detective was younger than Karen had expected, with sharp eyes and an expression that revealed nothing. "Mrs. Whitmore, you've been claiming business deductions for home office space, supplies, and utilities, while also claiming a full homestead exemption on your property taxes. Can you explain the discrepancy?" Karen's mouth felt like cotton. I didn't realize they were connected. I just did what my tax software suggested. For 5 years, I'm not good with taxes. I just followed the prompts." Detective Chen slid a folder across the table. "These are your bank deposits for the past 3 years. You've been receiving cash payments from tutoring clients, some of which were never reported as income. That's tax evasion, Mrs. Whitmore. I didn't know. Some parents just handed me cash, and I thought you didn't have to report it." Detective Chen's voice was patient but firm. "Ma'am, ignorance of the law isn't a defense. We're looking at potential charges of tax fraud, false filing, and unreported income. You could face up to 3 years in federal prison." Karen's vision blurred. "Prison? But I'm just a tutor. I help kids with homework." A tutor who's been operating an unlicensed business and evading taxes for years. Detective Chen closed the folder. "However, these charges could potentially be reduced to fines and penalties if you cooperate fully and make immediate restitution." "How much?" "Conservatively, including penalties and interest, you're looking at around $47,000. Karen felt the room spin. Her entire savings account had maybe $12,000. "I don't have that kind of money." "Then you'll need to make payment arrangements." "And Mrs. Whitmore," Detective Chen leaned forward, "I strongly suggest you get a lawyer. This case is moving fast, and whoever reported you provided very detailed documentation. Someone wanted to make sure we had everything we needed to prosecute." Walking out of the IRS building, Karen felt like she was moving through a nightmare. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Hope your meeting went well. Can't wait for Saturday." She called her lawyer, David Morrison, from the parking lot. His secretary squeezed her in for an emergency appointment that afternoon. "Karen, I have to be honest with you," David said, reviewing the IRS documents. This is bad, really bad. Whoever compiled this evidence knew exactly what they were doing. It was my neighbor, Dr. Marcus Chen. He's been systematically destroying my life because I complained about his pool parties. David looked up from the papers. Marcus Chen, the cardiac surgeon. You know him. I know of him. He's well connected in the city, sits on several boards, including the Hospital Foundation and the Medical Ethics Committee. David frowned. Karen, what exactly did you do to provoke him? Karen explained the whole situation, from her first complaint to the violation notices to the IRS investigation. David listened without interrupting, his expression growing more concerned. You picked a fight with someone who has resources, connections, and apparently no qualms about using them, David said finally. The question is, what does he want? He wants me to withdraw my complaint to the city. Can you do that? I tried. They said once it's filed, it has to be investigated. The best I can do is ask them to drop it for lack of evidence. Then do that today. Karen spent the rest of Thursday trying to undo what she'd started. She called the city planning office, explained that she'd made a mistake, that the complaint was frivolous. The inspector assigned to Marcus's case was sympathetic but firm. The investigation was already underway, and she couldn't simply call it off. However, Inspector Martinez said, if you were to submit a written statement retracting your allegations and stating that you no longer have concerns about the property, that would be taken into consideration. Karen immediately typed up a retraction letter, admitting she'd overreacted and asking the city to close the investigation. She hand-delivered it to the planning office and texted Marcus. I've retracted everything. Please call off the IRS. His response came an hour later. Too late for that, Karen, but I appreciate the gesture. See you Saturday. Friday. Morning brought another surprise. Karen's doorbell rang at 7 a.m. She opened it to find a man in an expensive suit holding a briefcase. Mrs. Whitmore. I'm James Patterson, attorney for the Pinewood Estates Homeowners Association. We need to discuss your recent violations. Karen's heart sank. I thought I had 2 weeks to fix everything. There's been a development. We've received additional complaints about your property, and frankly, the situation has escalated beyond simple violations. Patterson consulted his tablet, operating an unlicensed business, tax evasion, property maintenance issues. The board has voted to begin proceedings for your removal from the community. Removal? You can't kick me out of my own house. Your HOA agreement includes provisions for removal of homeowners who engage in illegal activities or damage the community's reputation. The board considers your recent tax issues and business violations to be exactly that kind of damage. Karen stared at him. How did you even know about the tax issues? The information was provided to us by a concerned community member who felt the board should be aware of activities that might affect property values and the neighborhood's reputation. Marcus, I can't discuss the source of the information, but I can tell you that the board is prepared to offer you a settlement. Sell your house within 60 days and we'll waive all fines and penalties. Refuse, and we'll pursue full legal action, including liens on your property. After Patterson left, Karen sat in her kitchen, staring at the HOA documents. In 3 days, Marcus had destroyed her business, triggered a federal investigation, and now threatened her home, all because she'd complained about his pool parties. She called her sister in Phoenix. Julie, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. If I had to move in with you for a while, would that be okay? Karen, what's wrong? You sound terrible. Karen broke down, explaining everything through tears. Julie listened, occasionally gasping or muttering, "Oh no," at the worst parts. Honey, of course you can stay with me. But are you sure this neighbor is behind all of this? It seems like an awfully big coincidence. It's not a coincidence. He practically admitted it. Then you need to fight back. You need to expose him. How he's a respected doctor. I'm just a tutor with tax problems. You're not just anything, Karen. You're my sister, and you don't give up. If he wants to play dirty, then you need to get dirty too. That evening, Karen sat at her computer, researching everything she could find about Marcus Chen. She found his professional profiles, his hospital affiliations, his board memberships. She found old news articles about his divorce 3 years ago, custody battles, and a malpractice lawsuit that had been settled out of court. She dug deeper, searching social media, professional networks, anything that might give her ammunition. At 2 a.m., she found something interesting. A forum post from 2 years ago where someone with Marcus's username had made controversial comments about immigration and healthcare access. The posts were inflammatory, possibly career-damaging if brought to the attention of his hospital's diversity committee. Karen screenshot everything, then sat back in her chair. She could fight back. She could try to destroy his career the way he'd destroyed her life. But as she stared at the evidence on her screen, she realized she was looking at a line she'd never thought she'd cross. The old Karen would never have considered using someone's private opinions against them professionally. The old Karen believed in fairness and proportional response. But the old Karen had also believed that following the rules would protect her. That being a good neighbor meant everyone else would be good neighbors too. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Tomorrow's the big day. Hope you're ready for a real community gathering. P.S. You should probably get some sleep. You look exhausted." Karen froze. She looked out her window toward Marcus's house, then at her computer screen. The timestamp on the text was 2:03 a.m. He was awake too, probably watching her. House, seeing her lights on, she took a screenshot of the text and added it to her growing file of evidence. Then she made a decision that would change everything. She opened her email and began typing, "To whom it may concern, at Metro General Hospital Ethics Committee, .. If Marcus wanted to play psychological warfare, she'd give him a war he'd never forget. But as she typed, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was crossing a point of no return, becoming someone she'd never wanted to be. Tomorrow was Saturday. Whatever Marcus had planned, whatever community gathering he'd arranged, Karen was going to be ready. And if he thought he'd broken her, he was about to learn that desperate people were capable of anything. The war was just beginning. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that made everything seem sharper, more dangerous. Karen had barely slept, her finger hovering over the send button on her email to the hospital ethics committee. She'd rewritten it 3 times, each version more damning than the last. At 9 a.m., she heard the first vehicles arriving at Marcus's house. Not the usual cars of friends coming for a pool party, but official-looking vehicles. A catering truck, a tent rental company, sound equipment being unloaded. Karen peered through her blinds, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. This wasn't a pool party. This was something much bigger. Her phone rang. David Morrison, her lawyer. "Karen, I need you to listen carefully. Do not send that email to the hospital." "How did you—" "I've been doing some research on your neighbor, and I discovered something important. Marcus Chen isn't just a cardiac surgeon. He's also a member of the City Council's Medical Advisory Board and a major donor to local political campaigns." Karen's blood ran cold. "What does that mean?" "It means if you try to destroy his career with those forum posts, you're not just attacking a doctor. You're attacking someone with serious political connections. Someone who could make your current problems look like a parking ticket." "But I have evidence of his inappropriate comments, Karen. Those posts are 2 years old, and they're from a private forum, even if they're authentic. Using them against him would be seen as harassment, especially given your current legal situation. You'd be handing him another weapon." Karen sank into her chair. "So what am I supposed to do? Just let him destroy my life? You're supposed to be smart. Whatever he's planning for today, let him have his event. Don't give him any more ammunition." After hanging up, Karen deleted the email draft and tried to focus on her own problems. She had 60 days to sell her house, a $47,000 tax bill, and a business that was effectively shut down. Even if she could somehow survive Marcus's campaign against her, she'd still lost everything. At 11 a.m., more vehicles arrived. A mobile stage was being erected in Marcus's backyard. Professional sound equipment, lighting rigs, and what looked like a complete outdoor kitchen setup. Karen had never seen anything like it. Then she saw the banner being unfurled across the stage. "Welcome to the first annual Pinewood Estates Community Health Fair." Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Hope you're watching. You inspired this whole event." By noon, the transformation was complete. Marcus's backyard had become a full-scale community event space. Food trucks lined the street. A jazz quartet played on the stage. Children's activities filled the pool area, which had been covered with a temporary deck. And then Karen saw something that made her stomach drop. Official city vehicles pulling up, not code enforcement or police, but sleek black cars with government plates. She watched in horror as Marcus emerged from his house wearing a perfectly tailored suit, greeting what appeared to be city officials like old friends. She recognized the city planning director, the police chief, and her heart-stopped mayor, Patricia Hernandez herself. The mayor, Marcus, had invited the mayor to his community gathering. Karen's phone rang. Unknown number, Mrs. Whitmore. "This is Sarah Kim from Channel 7 News. We're covering the community health fair next door. And we understand you filed a complaint about this event. Would you like to comment on camera?" "What?" "No, we're doing a story about community, cooperation, and how neighbors can work together to resolve disputes. Dr. Chen mentioned that you initially had concerns about his gatherings, but that you've since worked things out. Is that correct?" Karen realized with growing horror what was happening. Marcus hadn't just invited the mayor, he'd invited the media, and somehow he was spinning her complaints into a story about community cooperation. I need to think about this. Of course, we'll be filming all afternoon. The mayor is giving a speech at 2 p.m. about community health initiatives. Dr. Chen is being recognized for his volunteer work. It's quite an inspiring event." Karen hung up and ran to her window. The crowd was growing larger by the minute. She could see neighbors she'd known for years, families with children, elderly residents being helped to chairs near the stage. The entire community was there. Everyone except her. At 1:30 p.m., she watched Mayor Hernandez take the stage. The crowd quieted as she adjusted the microphone. "Thank you all for coming to this wonderful celebration of community health and cooperation. I want to especially thank Dr. Marcus Chen for organizing this event and for his continued commitment to making our city a healthier, more connected place." Applause rippled through the crowd. Karen could see Marcus standing near the stage, humble and gracious, accepting congratulations from city officials. "Dr. Chen approached me last week with a proposal," the mayor continued. "He wanted to create a monthly community health fair, bringing together residents, local businesses, and city services. He's already secured funding from the Hospital Foundation and volunteer commitments from dozens of medical professionals." Karen watched in stunned silence as Marcus stepped up to the microphone. "Thank you, Mayor Hernandez. This event represents what I love most about our community, the ability to come together, to support each other, and to turn challenges into opportunities." He paused, his eyes scanning the crowd. Karen was certain he was looking directly at her window. Sometimes the best ideas come from unexpected places. A neighbor's concern about community activities can inspire us to make those activities even better, more inclusive, more beneficial to everyone. The crowd murmured approvingly. Karen realized with sick certainty that Marcus was talking about her complaint, reframing it as inspiration for his community service. "That's why I'm proposing that we make this a regular event held right here in Pinewood Estates every month, a place where neighbors can gather, families can access healthcare resources, and our community can grow stronger together." The applause was thunderous. Karen watched the mayor shake Marcus's hand, watched city officials line up to congratulate him, watched her neighbors celebrate the man who had systematically destroyed her life. At 2:45 p.m., her doorbell rang. Karen opened it to find a young reporter holding a microphone, followed by a camera operator, Mrs. Whitmore. "I'm Jake Martinez from Channel 7. We're covering the health fair. And Dr. Chen mentioned that you were instrumental in inspiring this event. Can you tell us about your role in bringing the community together?" Karen stared at the camera, realizing she was trapped. If she denied involvement, she'd look petty and antisocial. If she claimed credit, she'd be participating in Marcus's fiction. If she told the truth about their conflict, she'd look like a bitter neighbor trying to ruin a community celebration. I'm just glad the neighborhood is coming together," she managed. "Dr. Chen said you initially had some concerns about gatherings in the neighborhood, but that those concerns led to this wonderful solution. How does it feel to see your suggestions make such a positive impact?" Karen felt the walls closing in. Marcus had maneuvered her into a position where any response would either make her look bad or give him credit for turning her complaints into community service. It's wonderful to see the community working together," she said weakly. "Will you be joining the festivities today?" Karen looked past the reporter at the celebration in full swing. Hundreds of people enjoying food, music, and activities. Children playing games, elderly residents getting free health screenings, the mayor mingling with constituents. And at the center of it all, Marcus Chun, the man who had destroyed her life, while simultaneously positioning himself as a community hero. I'm not feeling well today," Karen said, closing the door. She leaned against it, listening to the sounds of celebration from outside. Music, laughter, the mayor's voice announcing another community initiative. The event would be on the evening news, in the local paper, probably on social media for weeks. Marcus hadn't just defeated her. He'd turned her weapon against her and used it to elevate himself. Her complaint about his pool parties had given him the perfect opportunity. To demonstrate his commitment to community service, he'd invited the city's most powerful officials to witness his transformation from complained about neighbor to civic leader. And everyone would remember that it started with Karen Whitmore's complaint, the complaint that inspired Dr. Chen to create something beautiful for the entire community. Karen sank to her living room floor, surrounded by violation notices and legal documents, listening to the sounds of her neighbors celebrating the man who had orchestrated her downfall. She'd started this fight to preserve order and quiet in her neighborhood. Instead, she'd given Marcus Chen exactly what he needed to become untouchable. The war wasn't just over, she'd handed him a victory so complete that he'd never have to worry about her again. And the worst part was, everyone would think it was all her idea.